So now we're going to be moving on to lessons learned, and I think you're going to enjoy this part of the program also very much. So I would like to introduce and welcome Mark Stolce, and the Executive Director of SA Clubhouse, and Eric Estrada, the Operations Director. They're here in the front row. Y'all would like to stand and at least be recognized. We thank you very much for participating today in our agency training program and for agreeing to be one of our new mentors in our pilot program. I'll give you a little background on SA Clubhouse. SA Clubhouse is the recipient of our 2018 High Impact Grant in the Health and Wellness Focus Area. The purpose of their grant is to extend their mission of providing recovery-oriented volunteer opportunities for adults with serious mental illness through the acquisition of a turnkey hydroponic farming system. This will provide nutritious vegetables to their members and community partners and create meaningful volunteer work for their members. Eric has offered to share with us today some of the lessons SA Clubhouse learned in the process of applying for an Impact San Antonio grant, and to offer encouragement to each of you, whether you are applying for the first time or reapplying. So please welcome Eric Estrada to the stand.
I think this has been a real interesting conversation to sit through, having gone through this process now multiple years in a row and having been recipients of the last year's award night. I don't think there's any, I don't think I've ever been to any presentation about any kind of grant writing or application or foundation that's anywhere as clear as what you get here. I mean, I think for the last several years, what we have done personally, I have some notes written down, but it's really interesting to see all this and see it all laid out. For several years, what we have done is taken these slides, specifically the slides that Angela was going through, wherever, I don't know where she went, but like those 10 slides are the best rubric for any grant you're going to write ever. It just says, what do you do? Why is it important? Who does it impact? How does it have an impact? We literally copy those slides into Word, laid them all out, make sure that we are checking those boxes off as we go. So I'll start off by talking about that before getting into the actual slide. This is really, really helpful information for any application. Nobody is this transparent about what they do to lay down that 10% of the people are just not going to follow instructions. They're disqualified. Half the people are going to get looked at. A quarter of them are actually going to get a site visit. Like, there's never that transparency. It's really, really cool. So I'm going to talk really, really quickly, really briefly about what Clubhouse is, even though we're always told never talk about your organization at any part of the impact thing. There's all these times where they say don't talk about it. I think it's helpful to mention what Clubhouse does because it'll frame the rest of the way we've applied and what we have done. So we, again, are an organization that serves adults with a history of mental illness. The way that we provide support is we provide a therapeutic environment where people come in and become volunteers. So we are an office run primarily by adults living with a history of serious mental illness, major depression, PTSD, bipolar disorder, etc. So most of the work that happens in our organization is done by adults with serious mental illness. It is our mission. It is also our volunteer base. It's who we are, right? So that is the lens through which we look at this whole process. We have applied to Impact, I think, 5 or 6 times at least. I've been around Clubhouse for 5 years. We've applied every year that I've been around. I looked at some of our old applications, and I think every project that we've applied for that I'm familiar with are all valid projects. They're all really good projects to do. They were not good impact projects. So for several years, we laid stuff out and said, this is a thing that we think would be very helpful. I think without really fully understanding how impact funds and what impact really is here to do. And I don't remember which slide covered it. But I think if you understand, like we had a discussion about the hospital system, if what you are doing is a small portion of a huge project, it may not be as impactful. It may not be as appealing to impact, right? So really know your audience in a way that I think it's easy to kind of dismiss when you're looking at some big foundation that's just kind of a black hole. Here you're being told this is what we are looking for. So some of the projects that we approached in the past were not probably helpful. And so for the first couple of years, at least that I'm aware of, we never made it past the initial application. Again, with good projects. In 2017, we applied for a project called Hydroponic Urban Growth, right? And we made it to the site visit stage. We got eliminated at the site visit stage. And so we, every year we kind of had the same conversations. Are we going to apply to Impact? Because is it even worth it? Like, it's so much work and we're not and we've never been funded, right? Like, I don't know if this is even this is even doable. And so in 2017, I think we became a little bit hopeful because we actually made it to the site visit stage. We said, okay, well then clearly we're doing okay. Something is okay there, right? And as we prepared for 2018, we said, well, the 2017 project was still a really good project. We must have done something wrong in the process that didn't get us there. We reviewed the application, we made some updates, but we sent off, in large parts, mostly the same application we'd previously submitted. Again, we made it to the site visit, but this time, it was a whole different process for us, right? So like we look at the projects that we thought made sense. This project made sense, and now that we were in the site visit stage, we said we need to give this a little bit more attention, more than we gave it last year, right? And so in 2017, we treated it kind of like any regular site visit that we get from any foundation. People come in, we have a conversation, and that's it. In 2018, we brought back, again, bringing back what our mission is as an organization, we brought in our team of all of our members who were present, staff members, anyone that wanted to be part of this project, and said, if you needed to impress people that don't know what we do and talk about Project Hug, what would we do? And so we sat there with about 20, 25 people in a room with a whiteboard, laid out all these ideas of what we would show, how we would show, what can tell the Clubhouse story in a way that is going to be compelling. And so we had just a huge checklist of things that we wanted to get done, right? Really, like, no kidding, like, practice. And so we broke that all up. Everyone had their part. And so the day of the site visit, we planned, and again, we are told in the instructions, don't focus on the organization, but we said we can't tell our story. If we don't understand the organization, then why are we growing a bunch of vegetables? It doesn't make any sense. We have to explain the organization. So we spent like half an hour talking about what Clubhouse was. We gave a tour. We physically laid out an area outside where this equipment is going to be installed. We physically marked it off with duct tape. We brought plants into the house. The same vegetables that we're going to grow were brought in. Some of the same mediums that we're going to grow in were brought in. It was tangible. It was tactical. You could eat it. You could walk through the whole area. You couldn't have made it more clear what it is that we were trying to do. Our members got to be part of the process. We had members who were part of the presentation. It was all laid out, right? So that's on the site visit part. I'm going to look through some of my notes because I do have some things that I want to make sure that I don't miss. I think the big one is just the fact that your rubric is laid out for you. It doesn't get any clearer than this. This is what we are looking for. I would be looking at that stuff. On the grant writing side, I think, again, just be really clear about reading all the questions and making sure that you are not repeating yourself. The questions, because it's in the same system that a lot of the grants that we submit are in, it's in Foundant, it looks similar to other things, but it isn't, they aren't the same questions. And so if you just write the same things you write all the time, it's not going to be helpful. You really want to write it through the lens of what impact is laid out for you. We also looked at partners and who we might have, whom we might work with, right? You saw it multiple times in there. If there is a ripple effect, if you affect the community, man, 8 minutes go by really quick. Okay. Follow the instructions, practice. On the site visit side and on the grant writing side, we had multiple people reviewing everything. On the grant side, we wrote original grant. We had 4 people review it. We ended up scrapping the whole grant and starting over with a completely new thing. Right, it was like the day before it was due. We said, we're starting over. If we submit this, we don't think it's going to be what we need. We'll do the whole thing again. We redid the whole thing. We submitted it. We made it all the way through. As far as the presentation goes, if you're fortunate enough to make it to that, it was the same thing. It's a whole lot of practice. We did our whole presentation. We laid it out. People gave us terrible feedback or good feedback about us being terrible. Laid it all out. And we scrapped a whole bunch of stuff. And I think the thing to think about for this whole process is that it is like when you're applying for a job, right? Your goal of sending a cover letter is that someone is going to read your resume. The goal of the resume is that someone is going to call you in for an interview. The goal of the interview is to get the job. It was the same thing here. The goal of the grant is to get a site visit. Our application is to get a site visit. We got a site visit. It doesn't matter what was in the grant. I mean, we're still saying all the stuff that was in there, but we're assuming it's a brand new audience. They need to hear everything in a different way. If we made it through the site visit, now we did in 90 minutes, what we're going to have to do again in 5 minutes. So you got to take that 90-minute presentation, take the best, most impactful parts of it, and turn it into a 5-minute conversation. Or a 5-minute presentation on grant award night. So we treated every one of those basically like a brand new project. The messaging was maybe slightly different. The baseline, the facts were the same. The project was the same. We're not doing anything different. But the message was completely different in the grant and in the award night and in the site visit. There were different audiences with a different purpose trying to get just to the next stage. So the advice I would give is to do that. There was also probably some really interesting feedback that I heard from somebody in Impact when we were doing the site visit previously, and that was, if you are used to doing a lot of presentations and you're saying the same message frequently, you kind of get into a routine of how you say what you say. it is helpful to step back and maybe say it differently if you can, or find someone else to say it. So like in this instance, Mark had the presentation done by me and by one of our board members. We aren't the ones in the community all the time, but we were the people who had probably spent the most time on this specific project and probably the people best able to explain this project. And so we were the ones that spoke. If you're the ED or the CEO, that may or may not be you that's the best person to present this project. And I think it takes some humility to step back and say, you know what, let somebody else do this. So that was good for us. Overall, it's a worthwhile experience no matter what. If you can write a good, compelling grant proposal that gets you to a site visit, that is probably a good proposal to submit anywhere else. And so we have some grants that are still written that we wrote for impact that we will take to other funders when it's the right time for us. Again, in the future, but we know that those are about as good as it gets as far as the grant writing process goes. So I think, as I said, we are in the mentor program, so if you have questions from us, we'd be happy to look at your application. We can give you, I think we can review a couple of those. And last thing I would say is, your project has to be impactful from the beginning. You can't write a really impactful grant if the project itself is not impactful. And so there's enough talented people reviewing all this stuff that you're not going to get one by folks. And so start off with the best possible project. And if you don't have something, maybe it's not worth applying yet. But if you are going to apply, you have to have a good understanding of what you're going to do and make sure that your team can actually deliver on that. So I think I'm out of time. So thank you.